Hi again, everyone. It's Mrs. Freegee. Welcome to Lesson 8.2, Supplementary Angles. Before we get started today, I just wanted to remind you that with these videos, if you feel like I've gone through an example too quickly or you want to see an example a second time, remember that you can always go back in the video. So you can replay things that maybe you want to see again or that didn't make sense to you. So you can go back and you can pause the video, but you can also rewind it or go backward and watch things a second time. Okay, so don't be afraid to do that if I'm moving too fast. We have two learning targets again for today's lesson. The first, I can identify and describe supplementary angles. The second, I can use supplementary angles to find the measure of a missing angle. And again, I've been trying to give you a question to kind of frame the lesson and to get you thinking. And so today I want you to be really thinking about how we can use supplementary angles to find unknown angle measures. That's really what we're going to be focusing on today. So let's review really quickly before we move forward. This is another term that you should remember or may remember from fourth grade, and that is the concept of a straight angle. And a straight angle is essentially a straight line. But in a straight angle, it doesn't look like it, but there actually is an angle here. And the measure of that angle for that straight line is exactly 180 degrees. So a straight angle measures exactly 180 degrees. That's important to know because when we're dealing with supplementary angles, we are talking about two angles that add up to be 180 degrees. So if you look at the example that I have given you here, we still have our straight line, but now we have this ray here that's splitting it into two separate angles. And so since these two angles together have to add up to 180 degrees, since these two angles we know add up to 180 degrees, if this angle measures 100 degrees, we know that this must be 80. And we could show that by saying that the 100-degree angle plus the 80-degree angle adds up to a sum of 180 degrees. So in other words, those two angles are what we call supplementary. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of different examples where we would have to find some missing angles. This example says two angles are supplementary, so that's helpful because right away we know that they're going to add up to 180. If one angle measures 103 degrees, what is the measure of the second angle? So you can see down here I've labeled this angle 103 degrees, and we talked yesterday about how if we don't know a quantity or we don't know a measurement, we can always use the variable x and then use that to help us figure out what that value really is. So I'm going to write an equation here with my two angles. So I have this angle that's 103 degrees plus I have this angle that measures x, and I know that together they add up to 180 degrees. And I know that because they're supplementary. So here I just have a quick one-step equation. I want to get x alone. I'm going to subtract 103 from both sides because I have to do the inverse. And when I simplify that, these cancel, and I'm left with x is equal to 77 degrees. 77 degrees. Okay, so that tells me that one angle is 103, the other is 77. Let's take a look at another one. So this one says again, two angles are supplementary. If one angle measures 121 degrees, what is the measure of the second angle? You can see we've labeled 121 here. We've labeled this x because we're not sure what it is yet. Go ahead and see if you can write an equation that would help us to find the measure of this missing angle. So your equation should have said that we have this angle x, plus we have this angle 121 degrees, and we know that together they're going to give us 180 degrees. And you could have put these in either order. So you could have said x plus 121, or you could have said 121 plus x. Remember that the commutative property doesn't matter which way we add. I'm going to subtract 121 from this side because I want to get x alone, which means I also have to subtract 121 from this side. When I simplify, these cancel, and we're left with x is equal to 59 degrees. Okay, so this angle here would be 59. All right, let's check out another one. Two angles are supplementary. If one angle it measures 145 degrees, what is the measure of the second angle? So I'm going to give you a minute to write your equation that you would use to solve for this unknown angle. Go ahead and do that now. So on your paper, you should have written 145 because that's our first angle plus our angle x. And we know that since they're supplementary, right, because it tells us here, and we can see by looking at this, that they're going to add to 180. Go ahead and solve that equation and determine what the value of x would be. So you should have subtracted 145 from this side, 145 from this side, and when you simplify, these cancel, and that leaves us with an angle that measures 35 degrees. And I always like to come over into my diagram here and add that, just because sometimes I have to find more angles, so I like to label them as I find them. Okay? Let's see if you can try this next one completely on your own. So go ahead, see what you come up with, make sure you write your equation, and then you solve to find the measure of the missing angle. Okay, so you probably wrote on your paper, oh, you know what? There's an error here. So this should not say 17 degrees. This should say 165 degrees. If you looked at the picture, you probably were able to figure that out. So I apologize. But let's just go from there. So we have x, we have 165 degrees, and we know that together, those are going to add up to 180. You know what? I just caught another typo too. Anybody else catch it? This should say supplementary. I am so sorry. I hope that didn't confuse you too much. I hope that the diagram down here was helpful to you. But if that did mess you up in any way, that was completely my fault and not yours. So I have to be a little more careful with that. So let's anyway go back down here. So we have angle X. We have an angle that measures 165 for a total of 180. Subtract 165 from both sides. And that should leave you with a missing angle measurement of 15 degrees. Okay. So one thing I just want to mention, this is a very common misconception. And I think in 7th grade, the biggest mistake that I see students make is they mix up complementary and supplementary. So I just want to show you a trick that I learned years ago for remembering the measurements of complementary angles versus supplementary angles. You may come up with some ideas on your own, and if you do, be sure to share them with us. So this word complementary, if I take this C and draw a straight line here, you can kind of see that this almost looks like a 90 degrees, and complementary angles add up to be 90 degrees. Kind of cool, kind of a neat way to remember it. Supplementary, if I take the supplementary and draw a line here, it almost looks like an 8, right? And I can think about that as the 8 in 180, and a supplementary angle is 180 degrees. So if you're having trouble keeping the two of those, you're having trouble confusing those two, especially tomorrow when you do IXL and you'll be practicing both of them, you can kind of use this as a little trick. Seems to help people. And like I said, if you think of another way to remember it, be sure to give us a shout and let us know. Before I leave you, I just want to do a quick review of what we talked about today. So we had 2 learning targets, and we went through um, some learning with supplementary angles. The first thing we talked about was that review of that a straight angle measures exactly 180. Supplementary angles are 2 angles that add up to 180. And then, similar to when we worked with complementary angles, to find that missing angle, we're setting up an equation. Only today we set up our equation to equal 180 because supplementary angles equal 180 degrees. Okay, so we write our equation, we solve for x. Thank you so much for sticking with me today. I do apologize for a couple of those errors, and I hope that I'm going to be a little more careful in the future. I hope it didn't throw you off too much. If you have any questions at all or anything was confusing, remember you can watch the video again, or you can reach out to Mrs. Wall or myself. All right, take care, stay healthy, wash your hands. We'll talk to you soon.